Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final talk of the day in this room called Vapourware. And you know, Vapourware, that's a term we have for products that were announced that never came to be. And what if you all turned up, waited all day, turned up here, and there was nothing, no talk at all? It's like one word we have in the IT industry for this kind of stuff is slideware. And if there's one thing we got today, it's slides. So, hi everyone, welcome to this talk. I'm Anders Norås. I'm going to take you on a journey through computer history for many interesting products that never came to be. And we are starting out our journey in Montana, Canada, where there are great ski resorts and two particular mountains there, Whistler Mountain and Blackcomb Mountain. Those familiar with Microsoft product code names might know that these were the code names for Windows XP and Windows 7. But these two mountains, Whistler Mountain and Blackcomb Mountain, have ski slopes going down, and in the middle, where these two meet, there is a tavern. There is a little après-ski place down there, which is where the Microsoft product teams went when they were to have strategy meetings for the Windows product line. This was the Longhorn Saloon and Bar. Actual place. That's Dylan Beatty with his shirt off in the background there. So this is the place where Microsoft went, and this is also the place that gave its name to the long-lost Windows version that was known as Windows Longhorn. So this one was intended to be a small little in-between release of Windows between two big milestone releases. And Microsoft had their hype machine running on this one. In fact, even before Windows XP was released, they were starting to talk about a new brilliant version of Windows being in the making. And this is it. Or at least this is the internal Microsoft prototype of what was to become Windows Longhorn. But this thing is not made with any Microsoft technologies at all. This thing is actually made with something called Macromedia Flash. And Macromedia Flash was a technology which was really popular at the end of the 1990s, early noughties, that was used to make websites. And I must say, the UX department at Microsoft must be wizards with this thing, because I've never seen a Flash website that looks as good as this does. But this was made to showcase some of the features that you wanted to have in Windows Longhorn. And those things were like the shiny see-through windows. You would have a new file system that was known as WinFS that was to be based on Microsoft SQL Server so that you could do all of these fancy search features and things like that. Now, Google had actually solved the thing of indexing things and making it searchable for the entire web a few years earlier, but Microsoft still wanted to have SQL Server as their file system for Windows. That was one of Bill Gates' big ideas. Another of Bill Gates' big ideas was this right-hand side column you have there, which they created an entire web service stack for. So the Project Indigo, which was the web service integration platform that was coming with .NET, was intended to bring a weather forecast in there, because obviously you need the WS star stack with security and everything to have a weather forecast on the screen. So there was also Avalon, which was the code name for the new graphical UI, which was to leverage all of the hardware acceleration that was coming out on new computers in the early noughties. And there were loads of leaks around this one. The first leak came in 2002. It looked a whole lot like Windows XP, but it was not. It was actually based off Windows Server. So that's what they forked this one off when they started to build it. And then a steady stream of leaks came out, introducing new features, and the hype machine was going, and it just kept on and kept on and kept on. Then suddenly it all went quiet. And we do have a video from the Longhorn Saloon and Bar where they had their strategy meetings. And this is really it. And as you can say, as Mick Jagger sings, this could make a grown man cry. So they were having a good time. They were just not making or releasing a new version of Windows. And I guess a few of you in the room build business software for a living, right? And that was one of the things that Microsoft really wanted to bring forward with Windows Longhorn. So this is an internal video from Microsoft trying to evangelize the revolution that Windows Longhorn would be for business software development. And judging by sort of some of the blurbs on here, they had a quite bleak view on what business software was like at the time. So all of these things would give you a good foundation for building great business software until it sort of stopped. And Microsoft did what is known internally in the Windows division as the big reset. They went back to the original Windows Server source code and then started all over again. They did one more thing. They introduced a rule for the development. So one of the great ideas for Windows Longhorn was that it was going to be based on the brand new development platform that Microsoft just had released, known as Microsoft.NET. The rule they introduced was no .NET code whatsoever is going into the Windows code base. Because that early on, .NET was not just mature enough to develop Windows with. So only C++ was allowed. A little bit of .NET code finally made its way into the code base for the Windows Media Center, but that was it. So that is the story of Windows Longhorn.
Anyone is thinking that maybe this is some kind of prototype or something, let's run a classic application. Anyone remember VisiCalc?
And this is actually what they showed at the PDC conference in 2003 when they were demoing Windows Longhorn to show that it could run proper business applications. VisiCalc.
There have been two real explosions that have propelled the industry forward. The first one really happened in 1977, and it was the spreadsheet. I remember when Dan Filestra, who ran the company that marketed the first spreadsheet, walked into my office at Apple one day and pulled out this disk from his vest pocket and said, I have this incredible new program. I call it a visual calculator, and it became VisiCalc. And that's what really propelled the Apple II to the success it achieved.
So, early 1980s, everyone was building business software and business suites. Just the first 3 years after the IBM PC first was released back around 1980, you had things like WordStar, WordPerfect, what would eventually become Microsoft Word, Lotus 123, lots of business productivity software being released. And in 1983, a company called Ovation Technologies appeared with what was to be a fully integrated suite of business productivity tools. Because before that, you had different tools for word processing, for spreadsheets, for communication, and so forth. What Ovation Technologies was one integrated package. So think of this as Office 365 for the early 1980s. This is what it looked like. You have loads of press coverage on this one and a brilliant UI. So these are screenshots of the actual UI, but this was actually revolutionary at the time because you could have pie charts in with your text, which was something that no other tools could do. And so this was a game changer. And it was also bundled with a few computers supposed to be bundled with a few computers that were on the market. So, but it was all very quiet until the press started asking questions. And the first one to start asking questions was John Gans. with his article, The Story of O, which was in the Tech Street Journal in, I guess it was late 1983. And he was asking the question whether or not this product was real or not. Because the thing was that Ovation Technologies had demoed this product on many industry conferences. And as we saw, they got loads of positive press coverage. But one little minor detail that no one was asking questions about, and that was that whenever they demoed this thing, they never did that on an actual computer. They were running the demos of a VHS videotape. And a little bit later, the chief architect for the product, Robert Kutnick, sort of got into this very, very public battle with the CEO of the company, talking about all the difficulties they had developing this one. One of the things that he struggled with was a requirement that Ovation needed to have a capability of doing 7 million cells in a spreadsheet. That seems like quite an arbitrary number, and the closest competitor, Lotus 123, which was the market leader at the time, had the capability of having around 2 million cells. So 7 million is at least 3 times as good. So this happened, and then the press started talking about this as vaporware. And this is actually the first time ever that that term is used in the industry press to describe software that is announced and never released. So Ovation Technologies got a whole lot of VC investment money in 1983. By 1984, they were bankrupt and there was no product at all. So vaporware, that is a term that we have to thank these two beautiful women for. Anne Winbold on the left and Esther Dyson on the right-hand side. Now, Anne Winbold is best known for being Bill Gates' ex-girlfriend. And they actually had quite a special relationship. After Bill Gates married Melinda, Anne and Bill used to go on vacations together every single year. I don't know what my wife would say about if I did something similar. And she was the one who coined the term vaporware. And she used this term in a discussion with Esther Dyson on an industry conference where she met Esther Dyson in 1983. And Esther Dyson was publishing a newsletter called the Rosen Electronic Letter, or Release for short. And this is the November 1983 edition of her newsletter, where she uses the term vaporware and writes exactly about this phenomenon that more and more companies are announcing software products that never get released. And she has some examples in there. These are some of the products she references. Dayflow, which is a sort of a database system, and Foxbase, which is another one. Now, Foxbase actually got released and was what would become Microsoft Fox Pro, so it was a proper product. So she was probably a bit early on calling vaporware on that one, but that sort of goes to show that once in a while, things might be worth the wait. And something that you had to wait long for was this thing. So this is the computer game Duke Nukem from 1991. This was a very innovative game at the time it was released. It had a quite good side-scrolling mechanism that actually John Carmack, who later went on to be part of ID Software, helped develop. And this was a big success. And whenever you have a big success, you're expected to follow that. And they did with Duke Nukem 3D in 1996. This was sort of a typical 1990s action hero game. And the plot of this was that you had Duke Nukem, your action hero, saving the world, saving the Las Vegas strippers from an alien invasion. Now that's sort of a storyline that went very nicely home with quite a few teenage boys at the time, and I guess that is part of the reason why this was such a huge success. This was a breakaway hit, and it was also the beginning of the end for the developers of this one, because now they had 2 huge successes on their hands, and we need to follow up with something even bigger. So at the E3 gaming convention in 1997, they announced Duke Nukem Forever. And as time would show, this would take forever to be developed. So they had their own Prey 3D engine that they were developing for another first-person shooter game at the time, but they wanted their new game to be the best game ever. And they were not going to let any technology limitations stop them. So when they announced this, they said that we will use the Quake engine from the Quake game that had come out a bit earlier that year, which was the best game ever at that time. A year passes, a new press release comes out. We are now changing to the Unreal engine from the Unreal game, which was at that time the best game ever. And then they just keep on going and developing this thing, and they are continuously releasing new press releases, just announcing the changes they are doing and that this will be the best game ever. Now this might be a word of warning to the front-end developers amongst you. Do not change JavaScript frameworks all the time. It will not lead to any progress being made. But they were stacked. They had truckloads of money from their earlier success, and even if they sold the publishing rights, they retained the intellectual property rights to the game, and they just kept on developing. And they kept on developing. And they kept on developing. Come 2001, and it's been 10 years since the first successful Duke Nukem game was released. They released a 10-year anniversary trailer, taking it all the way back to the 1991 edition, and really selling the world on how great this game will be. Going all the way back there, and but there's still no game being released. And few things happen. The publishing company buys another game from 3D Realms, which gives 3D Realms even more money to just keep on developing this game. So they carry on and on and on, and things start to happen. Even CNN writes about the ongoing sort of more and more public discussions between the publisher and the developer. And they finally run out of money. But then something interesting happens. At the Penny Arcade Expo in 2010, Gearbox, which is now the studio owning the rights to this one, announces that you can come and play a demo version of Duke Nukem Forever at their booth if you're 17 years or older. And this is the line. The line goes all the way around the convention center, so there's still interest after more than 10 years in development for this game. Come May 24th, 2011, Duke Nukem Forever is released. It's not a particularly good game. It starts off like this and goes on like this throughout. The reviews were less than stellar, I can tell you. Some of the reviewers gave this a -1,000 score for the first and last time ever. Some said that the only good thing about this is that it was finally released. So this sort of brings us to the question, is Duke Nukem Forever Vapourware? And it is, because this is not the game they set out to create. This was not the best game ever, using the best technology ever. This was just something that was necessary to put a stop to a very, very long story. And they're still in the Guinness Book of Records for the game that has the longest development time ever of 14 years and 44 days. Now, I've been told that that record has now been broken by another game, so we might have to change the story here a bit. Do you realize that it's only 11 months till Christmas? So has anyone started thinking about what you're going to buy for Christmas gifts, any presents or ideas? If not, I can recommend Neiman Marcus, a chain of department stores in the southern states in the USA. They publish a Christmas book every single year. This is the Christmas book from 1969. And they have loads of great things in there, loads of great gift ideas. So the theme for the 1969 edition were gifts that keep on growing. You could buy a baby elephant. That's a very slow-growing gift. Or you could buy a rapidly growing plant. And this sort of falls in with all of the other great gift ideas that Neiman Marcus has had in their Christmas catalog. You can buy a his and hers set of camels. You could buy a colonial-style chicken coop, a mermaid swimming suit with included mermaid swimming lessons, or a rose gold private jet. All of these things were on sale. But I think my favorite was the item that was on sale in the 1969 edition of this catalog. And this is the Honeywell kitchen computer, with the tagline, "If she can only cook as well as Honeywell can compute." This was 1969. Gender equality was a non-existent thing. So this computer would set you back $10,600, which probably would buy you a quite nice suburban home at the time. But included with that price came a 2-week programming course, because this computer did not come with any pre-installed software. You had to write the software yourself. So if you ever found yourself reinventing the relational database while you tried to make recipe management software, housewives in Texas have been there before you. So this is the Honeywell kitchen computer, and it's also known as the Honeywell H200. Here featured in the film The Billion-Dollar Brain from 1967, where the Honeywell H200 computer plays one of the lead roles together with Michael Caine in a plot where a former British spy stumbles upon a scheme to overthrow communism and needs the help of the Honeywell supercomputer to solve the mystery. And this is one of the few existing recordings of the Honeywell supercomputer out there. And I have read quite a bit about this, and this is a to-the-point, perfect depiction of how this thing actually was used. So this is how housewives in Texas would go around in the kitchens with their Honeywell kitchen computer and make the best meals they've ever served their husbands. And this brings us on to a sort of interesting little sidetrack in this talk about vaporware computers. Now, you might not think of IBM as a very design-savvy company, but in 1981, Paul Rand designed this logo for IBM's new Think motto. And this is known as the IBM poster. This is actually part of the permanent collection at MoMA in New York. So this is a design icon. What is not as well known are the computers that IBM were designing at the time. So this is the IBM Yellowbird computer, designed in 1976, the year I was born. It's designed by Tom Hardy at IBM, and it's inspired by Tweety Bird. That's where the bright yellow canary color comes from. It has this sort of nice little printer over there at the left-hand side. It has a cartridge slot in the middle. You are supposed to hook it up to your television set and can use it in your home. This is Tom Hardy's daughter in the photo in the upper left corner there, using the computer. Only that this was not really an actual computer, it was just a design mock-up, and it did not work. But Tom Hardy took this to the IBM board of directors and pitched that maybe we should try releasing computers for the consumer market, which IBM were quite skeptical towards. And you might think, that's a bit boring, but we have to remember that 1976, this was the year the Apple I was released, and computers at that time came in a bread box. You had to assemble it yourself and solder it together. And at that time, IBM actually designed this thing, but it was never produced. But Tom Hardy is not a man who is easily stopped. So the year after, he comes up with this thing. This is the IBM Aquarius computer, designed in 1977. Aquarius, the age of Aquarius, a new time for IBM. That's the idea behind the name. The color is not randomly chosen either. This is the color that was used on the most popular IBM typewriters that were in many American homes at the time. So consumers were used to having IBM products in their homes. This thing had quite a few interesting features. It had the cartridge slot where you had something that IBM called program packs that would have like text processing software, educational software that you can pop in. But it also had this touch-sensitive pad over on the right-hand side, and with these cards you can slide in that match the software. So think of this as sort of your right-click context menu for your software. But this, in comparison to the Yellowbird, this was an actual working computer. They built this thing. He worked with the engineers at IBM to create this computer. And it also had something very innovative that was known as bubble memory, which was a permanent storage similar to the flash memory we have today. This was very new at the time, and that did not reduce the skepticism the IBM board of directors had towards producing this thing. So this one was scrapped at the same time. For context, 1977, the year the Commodore PET-1 was released, the Apple II was released this time, and we could have this beauty, the IBM Aquarius computer. Designers at IBM are not easily stopped. They kept on designing interesting computers, and in 1992, the same month as the first time Kate Moss ever appeared on the cover of Face magazine, the internationally renowned design magazine, ID magazine, ran a front page article with the question, can design save IBM? And the computer they have here is the IBM Leapfrog, which was a tablet computer with a stylus and everything. And just, you can see in the small little presentation video of it, this was a beautiful machine. Of course, IBM scrapped this one as well, but you can find the original prototype in the permanent collection at MoMA as well. So IBM has done quite a bit of nice design work when it comes to computers that were never ever released, Vapor computers. So whenever I go on Spotify and click into my Spotify Discovery playlist, there's one song that I actually have on vinyl back home that always reappears, and it's Gillian Welch's Everything is Free Now from 2001. Anyone heard that song? It's really a song about she being expected to give away her music for free. It's a telltale sign of what was to happen. And this is the Microsoft Zune MP3 player. Anyone had that? Always a couple of people who had this one. I had the iPod myself. But this is the story about a streaming service known as Q-Trax. And Q-Trax announced their product on the Meedum Music Industry Conference in Cannes, February 2008. This is James Blunt playing at their release party, filmed from inside his grand piano. So any James Blunt fans out there, you might recognize this song. So no expenses were spared in promoting this product, which was known as Q-Trax, and it looked like this. This was something that ran on computers. It was built with Microsoft Silverlight, which was what came out of the technology that was the UI framework for Windows Longhorn, which we met earlier in this presentation. And it was fairly slow, but you can go on there, you could search for music, and you can download that music onto your computer in Windows Media format, and then put it onto your MP3 player. All well and good. Their main competition was Apple's iTunes at the time, so good to have a competitor on that. The only thing was that when you went on there and started searching for things, you could find some interesting works on there. Anyone have any of these in their record collections at home? The Rolling Stones Ultra Rare Tracks #1, or Bruce Springsteen Ultra Rare Tracks, or the Beatles Ultra Rare Tracks? Probably not, because these are not official releases. These are bootlegs that were traded amongst fans, and particularly traded quite a bit on illegal file sharing networks. And that's the thing, because Q-Trax was just a web interface built on top of the LimeWire peer-to-peer file sharing network. And there's one thing you need to have if you are to create a streaming service, and that's not just the software to distribute the music. You also need to have the agreements with the right holders to actually publish and sell this music, which was something that Q-Trax did not have. In October 2008, a small Swedish company with the same profile colors launched something called Spotify, and that brought this to a natural end. But in case you're wondering, this is how CDs are manufactured. So this is a CD manufacturing plant. It looks kind of amazing. It also looks quite expensive. Clean room thing where you make little discs out of aluminum and plastic onto which you can record music or other forms of data. But what if we could have something cheaper to distribute data on or store data on? What about if we could use something like paper for storing information? That would be a new and novel idea. And someone had that idea, and in this publication called the International Journal of Technology and Engineering Studies, which is an academic journal published in India, there was a paper on Rainbow Technologies. And Rainbow Technologies had the idea of using paper to store information. Not in the way we usually use paper to store information by writing on it, but by actually having different colored dots that would encode the information onto the paper. And I'm not entirely sure if this publication holds up to the rigorous academic standards for papers, but it looks the part. It has that architectural diagram over on the right-hand side there, which shows sort of the process flow of this, and it has a bold statement that once the Rainbow technology is in, soon we could be watching full-length, high-definition videos from a piece of paper. That would be pretty damn good, I would say. So let's do the back of the envelope on that. So a piece of A4 paper, which is what we usually use here in Europe, is 210 by 297 millimeters big. And on that sheet of paper, you would store 450 gigabytes of data. Okay, let's be fair. Let's say that we have a really, really good flatbed scanner that can scan 1,200 dots per inch. And if we convert the American measurements to European ones, that would mean if we printed full bleed, edge to edge on this piece of paper, we could fit 134 million dots onto there. That's a decent amount of dots. And let's be really generous and say that we also have a really great scanner that is capable of distinguishing 256 different colors. That would give us 1 byte per dot, or 144 megabytes per page. We probably should have something like error correction or something like that in there as well. The paper mentions that they will use triangles, circles, and squares printed on the paper for that without explaining any further detail of that. This thing, the Rainbow Technologies, reminds me of something that was immensely popular back in the 1990s. This is something called a magic dot drawing. Anyone seen this? It's sort of seemingly just a random selection of dots, but if you stare at this thing, just focus on that and stare at it, something usually appears and pops up off the page. And that's exactly what this thing was. This is Ted Nelson. Ted Nelson is one of the unsung heroes of our industry. Without Ted Nelson, we would not have hacker culture as we have today. Ted Nelson is one of those people that we do not talk about often enough. And in 1974, Ted Nelson published his book, a self-published work called Computer Lib. He sold it for $7. For context, that was the year the Altair 8800 kit was released, the first ever home computer. And this book is really written to teach laymen about what computers are and what they can do. And he did everything himself. He wrote this on a typewriter. He drew nice little headlines, cut and paste, put this together in a nice little fanzine style with illustrations in there. Loads of interesting content on there. He even had some of those naughty bits that made Duke Nukem so popular a few years later. But this is a really interesting book. It was actually published by Microsoft Press as a proper book in the mid-1980s. And it's worthwhile reading. You can pick up a copy of this for a fair price at eBay, or you can find it online as a PDF, if that's your thing. But the interesting thing is that on the flip side of this, there was another book called Dream Machines. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the adventures of Ted Nelson and Xanadu, which is the project he describes in Dream Machines. So Ted Nelson is the person who invented hypertext. He was the one who coined the term hypertext, and he started out on a journey to create a hypertext web in the early 1960s. He named that after the castle in the poem The Kubla Khan, known as Xanadu. And he envisioned that you would have throughout the United States, maybe also the entire world, these Xanadu spots where you could go and connect to his computer network and access hypertext information. And he thought that this would be like little mom and pop shops that were family-run businesses where you could come with your friends, sit down at a computer terminal, and not only consume information from his Xanadu web, but also produce information and get paid for the content that you produced. And if everyone ever quoted your content, you would get attribution for that as well, through the Xanadu hypertext network. And you can imagine driving along with your family in the car, seeing a roadside sign that says over 2 million screen hours served on your local Xanadu spot. You would take off, the kids would maybe sit down at the terminal, play a game on one of the machines while the parents waited for a bigger sort of horizontal CRT screen where they could look at their photos and reminisce and for their memories. This is Ted Nelson himself with one of the prototypes he built for what he envisioned that these Xanadu stands would look like. So throughout the 1960s, Ted Nelson kept building this thing by himself, but in the 1970s he met a group of students at Princeton, and they had a computer club that was called the Resistors, or Radically Empathetic Students Interested in Science, Technology and Other Research Studies. Long tongue twister of a name there. And the average age of the people in that club was 15. The girl in front here is Lauren Zarno. She was 14 years old at the time when Ted Nelson met these people, and she became his personal assistant. They would actually go on and marry 46 years later. But these kids were the ones building Xanadu together with Ted Nelson in the 1970s. Around 1987, he had managed to set up a proper company around this with interesting titles. So you had Roger Gregory, who was the second in command after Ted Nelson himself. He had the title System Anarchist. You had Mark Miller, who was just a hacker. And you had Philip Salin, who was an accelerator. There was also a woman, Gail Pergamit, who had the title Hidden Variable. That's why she's not shown in my drawing here. And this sparked the interest of John Walker, who had recently struck gold with his product Autodesk. So he had money to invest. And in 1988, he invested into Xanadu to bring Ted Nelson's vision of this great hypertext web to life. And John Walker said that in the 1960s, Xanadu was a dream in a single mind. By 1980, it was a shared goal of a small group of brilliant technologists. By 1989, it will be a product, and by 1995, it will change the world. Come 1995, and the world has changed. Hypertext and the web is something that most of the world actually know about, but it's not Ted Nelson's web. It's the World Wide Web as we know it today, due to these two guys, Mark Andreessen and Tim Berners-Lee. But that doesn't stop Ted Nelson, does it?
How would the future look like, and where would computers and the access to that future?
Well, son, okay. What we're trying to do with Project Xanadu is create a world so startling that most people, we have something called Xanadu shock, okay? And every one of us has gone through 3 or 4 levels of Xanadu shock, and we don't know how many levels there are of Xanadu shock as you realize what we're creating. And we continually go through it ourselves. Basically, we've discovered what has to be the right and fundamental design for the library of the future. A system which has both a rational form of storage that is not elsewhere available in computerdom, and a way of linking them all together so that anything published on any one computer anywhere in the world or in space can be accessed instantly. Less speed of light considerations, less disk queuing, less a few things like that, so that essentially within seconds you will have access to anything that is written and published. It's very different from people in the video disc world. For example, if you're in the video disc world, somebody's got to have the video disc right there in the room. What good is that? I don't want a subset. No subset will do. And that's the whole point. If you can't have it all, look somewhere else. And the point of Xanadu is that as we get this ever-expanding library with millions of people online simultaneously, they will all be able to publish simultaneously, add things, annotate, make links, and we hope live in a freer environment than we live in now. Now, there's some big political issues here, and that's also going to be in my next book, Computopia Now.
So Ted Nelson,
Thanks very much.
explaining his Xanadu project in 1981. Ted Nelson was a man with big visions, and today he is 85 years old. He has not stopped. He's carrying on developing Xanadu. It's been more than 60 years in the making. This is an interesting piece of software. This is NerdPerfect, nerd processing software released in 1987 by Vaporsoft Incorporated. So this was the packaging. Inside there you would find a floppy disk. But those of you familiar with this particular kind of floppy disk might notice that there's something missing. The actual disk inside the casing is not there. And this was what you got. It's exactly what it says on the box. There's nothing. But there was something in there. There was actually a booklet with sort of badly written jokes and commentary on the state of the computer industry in the mid-'80s. So at least you got that. And this thing got some fairly positive reviews, and some of the industry press wrote that finally there's someone releasing some software which is actually the thing that it says on the box. It's nothing. It's what you see is, or don't get, or something like that. Yeah, whatever. So this one was actually quite popular. And I think one of the reviews of it was in the local newspaper. These people who produced this were from Portland, which described it as the high-tech pet rock of 1987. And the pet rock was something that was sold in the 1960s. It was an actual rock that you could buy for real money and have in your house. And it sold millions worth of rocks. Nerd Perfect didn't do that well. So this is an interesting little product, and it sort of brings us to the thought that we've been through many, many, many different stories about products that failed, that never came to be, and many of these stories are a bit funny, and we can laugh at them. But at the same time, I think we should have respect for these people who actually invest their time and money into building something that they truly believe in. Because without these kinds of people, we wouldn't have any progress. So we should respect these people, and we should remember that they are real live people with big dreams that are crushed along the way.
It's been very lonely, but I've been absolutely sure of what I've been doing all the time. So one of the main definitions of paranoia is believing what nobody else believes. So one cure is for the patient to change his mind and believe what the rest of the world believes. That is the low road. The other, by which I hope to cure myself, is to persuade everybody else. And then I will no longer be paranoid, but recognized as having been right all along.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Vapourware, the best software that ever was. I'm Anders Norås. Thank you all for coming, and have a safe trip home. Thank you.